Whoa, what was that all about? My name's Nick 70. I'm here to talk a little bit about my work, Cup with Cistern. It's in the 23rd San Angelo Museum of Fine Arts ceramic competition. I'm really excited to be in the exhibit, and I'm going to give you a little bit of a discussion on what my work's about, show you how my process works, the making aspect of it, but also the thoughts that are behind it. So this is Cup with Cistern. You'll notice the ceramic components as well as rubber tubing, clear plastic, some burned wood, and there is epoxy used in several of the parts. The object on the left is an oil can made into an oil lamp. I love objects made out of other objects. On the right is my favorite trompe-l'oeil object, an I Ching teapot. I'll show how I make the coral textures that I find so fascinating a little later in the video. And I also love environmentally fired pots like the one on the right. This spouted form is a great example of a make-do repair or adaptation. This was used to fill automotive radiators. So the maker took a piece of copper, made it into a tube, and soldered it on. It's not pretty, but it works. Make do. I throw many of my forms on the wheel. You'll notice as I'm throwing that I don't really use the same form over and over again. Each form is a little different than the next. That's because I'll take those objects, cut them up, and add feet, manipulate the lip, and add the textures. Now I'm going to take some big chunks out of this piece, and as I take them out, I'll move over, put them into some plaster molds I'll show you, push the texture into those sections, and then reattach them. These are some examples of my press molds. I've used everything from a rubber floor mat to an old badge from a GE washing machine. I'm a big fan of the lids that come off of disposable coffee cups from different companies, but those plastic lids stay in the environment for hundreds if not thousands of years. I like to have a surface where I'm really impressing the clay and getting a high relief out of it. So everything from a gas can to that other piece is supposed to look like plastic. So these textures are used and pressed into different sections. I also use a variety of different hand tools that I've built out of clay and wood and different materials. I'll show those a little later in the video as an example of how I get those textures. But I really enjoy creating high contrasting surfaces. I love leaving the clay bare on its own like I Ching ware, but the colored slips really add an extra layer. So here's some examples of some of the tools that I've made. You'll notice the texture that I use to make some of the coral is actually made out of a small earthenware clay stamp. This is another tool that I've used to make that coral texture, and it's just repeating that pattern over and over again. And as I do that, I actually turn the tool in my hand, so it gives it different textures and spins around that surface a little bit. The next set of tools I've made out of wooden dowels. This is a larger dowel, and I've hollowed the end of it out, so by pressing it in, it'll give me something that can look like a rivet or a bolt that's sunken in below the surface. And I've done several different sizes and diameters for those so I can vary it. I can make it look like anything from a small eyeball to something that has several rivets that are holding something together. As we zoom in here, you can see how I've kind of done that. And this is another example of the smaller tools that I've, again, added texture to the end of that dowel, and I use that to create another kind of deep sea texture that you would find in brain coral. And again, I rotate it in my fingers as I impress it into the clay, and that's what gives it that surface. Not all of my textures are as structured as those. I dropped a piece of clay on the floor one day, and when I picked it up from the rubber floor mat, it created these great lines. It looked like corrugated metal to me. When I take that piece of clay and I drop it on the floor mat texture again, it creates this great checkered pattern. So all of those textures, details, and surfaces go into creating cups, yunomis, cups with straws, which I really look at as studies for the larger, more complex pieces. You'll notice the plastic in the top of this piece, much like Cup with Cistern that's in the exhibit. I need that transparency so that you can see the interior details that I create. All the work combines discarded and dilapidated forms with distressed organic textures and the trompe-l'oeil aspect of clay I love so much. Along with mixed media and the plastics, these objects are meant to speak of the daily wear on man-made disposable products that remain in the environment for centuries. These devices seem inefficient and obscure, with drips and stains suggesting leaking joints and connections. Like a damaged relic, I want to encourage the viewer to explore and question the potential function. The combination of these elements adds timelessness to the work, leaving the viewer wondering if it is from the future or of the past. So thanks for listening, and if you have any other questions, feel free to go to my website, nick70.com. I also have an Instagram handle. It's at nick7e. So just look me up and you can find my work. Thanks.